on the receiving end of that meteor beam. If you are looking to try and slow things down, you got to make sure that's kind of used up first. But if you can position that Chi-Yu right, well, it could definitely be a fish that has the opportunity to prove its worth.
The little fish that could here is the Chi-Yu for Geo. It did really well in that first match on stream, connecting this Heat Wave. We won't see it just yet. Immediately, Bezod starting off with those double Psychic types, the Lunala and DE, to get that Psychic terrain going, facing down the Cornerstone Ogerpon and the Flutter Mane from Geo's end.
So Geo definitely has a lot of offensive pressure here looking at these Pokemon, this Cornerstone one as well. These Ivy Petals do a lot of work, but I feel like when you see this Lunala and this Indeedee, a couple different ways you can go, but my first two thoughts is, are we seeing a Trick Room or are we seeing Expanding Force?
I mean, those are the two big options there for sure from this Lunala. You really want to be able to break this Shadow Shield ability as quickly as you can, because when the Lunala is at full HP, any attacks that hit it will be doing half the damage they normally would. You do have the option to go for the Icy Wind with the Flutter Mane. Might not be the greatest idea when Trick Room gets set up, but looking at these teams, I'm not sure that the speed differences matter as much as this Shadow Shield might, so it could be a decent option for Geo just to make sure that Shadow Shield gets out of the way. But otherwise, Moonblast doing some decent chip damage. We've seen Ivy Cudgel be, a really consistent source of damage as well.
No Icy Mane at... No Icy Wind of Flutter Mane. There we go. Opts to leave the field. Chi-Yu joining instead. Beads of Ruin, special defense is going to be dropped for everything else. Indeed, anything from this Ogerpon is going to be redirected into that supporting Pokemon as sure. Ivy Cudgel, decent amount of damage into it, just bringing it down below half as Lunala sets up the Trick Room. So now, all these slower Pokemon, well, they're going to be speedy.
I do like this Trick Room setup. Of course, now Lunala will have the speed advantage and be able to attack before this Ogerpon and Chi-Yu, and of course that Flutter Mane that is looming in the back for Geo. This Chi-Yu swap is nice though. If Expanding Force did come through from that Lunala, it's kind of a wasted turn from it. And now the Meteor Beam is a threat still. Of course, that's probably a clean one-hit KO on this Chi-Yu, but Ogerpon sticks around, able to use that Follow Me to redirect the Meteor Beam as a single target attack, and then Chi-Yu can start firing off some Snarls. And once Meteor Beam is used, again, it's just a one-time use attack. That Power Herb gets used up, and then if you want a Meteor Beam again, it has to take 2 turns, and that's often not the time you can spare.
At least you do have other powerful options too, and if I'm looking at a Chi-Yu that would not appreciate a Meteor Beam whatsoever, then there is potentially the Terastallization to get out of a weakness, which then leaves you susceptible to getting Expanding Force on that following turn. So whether we see the Terastallization from Geo is yet to be seen. Lunala, making sure you're not taking the most damage from a Snarl, only be a special attack drop into the Water-type Terastallization. So also resisting any Fire-type attacks. Helping Hand, making sure you can capitalize the most of this damage. No Terastallization for Geo, but Ogerpon, another great way to keep this Chi-Yu safe. Now anything from this Lunala is going to get redirected. So if it was Expanding Force, and there was Terastallization or swap, it'd be hit everything. But the Meteor Beam, you get that raise, but you're hitting into a sturdy Pokemon.
Yeah, Ogerpon will not be knocked out this turn thanks to its sturdy ability, even though this huge Meteor Beam comes through. With the Helping Hand would have been enough for the one-hit KO, but instead sticks around to go for at least one more attack, and Snarl comes through, knocks out that Indeedee, and gets some chip damage on that Lunala, breaks Shadow Shield, and returns it back down to neutral special attack, importantly. Now that this Indeedee is gone, this is becoming a much more playable situation for Geo, and especially this Chi-Yu, because, again, Lunala cannot use Meteor Beam anymore unless it wants to take 2 turns, and that's not really time you can afford when you have something like this Chi-Yu staring you down.
Getting that special attack drop, so you're just at the neutral as opposed to the +1. I think Lunala kind of struggles in that attacking department. So that is definitely a good way to start limiting it. But now this Lander is hitting the field. This is going to be at full capacity. It has that Life Orb, it has the Sheer Force, and that's also something that heavily threatens this Chi-Yu, and this Ogerpon's only going to be able to redirect 1 hit.
That and the speed interaction here might be important. Landorus and Chi-Yu at very similar speeds naturally, and given that Bezod has this Trick Room mode, you might think, possibly train this Landorus to be a little bit less speedy, which might mean that Chi-Yu will be acting after the Landorus, which would be pretty detrimental, especially if this Ogerpon can't protect it from a Sandsear Storm.
Ogerpon's just going to protect instead. With Chi-Yu, since you have the coverage, cannot go for any protect. Of course, Expanding Force, Chi-Yu is immune to that since it is that dark typing, but if the Landorus is the next to act, and it is, that Earth Power is going to be more than enough to deal with it.
And very smart Earth Power there instead of Sandsear Storm. You have the Lunala attacking before the Landorus, will be able to knock out the Ogerpon if it opts to go for a Follow Me, and then Earth Power does not have a chance to miss, guaranteeing that this Chi-Yu will not be able to attack and get off overheat to possibly KO this Landorus, another Snarl to lower their special attacks. And now Geo has to bring in a Pokemon. I believe 1 or 2 more turns of Trick Room left, so these speed interactions are going to be kind of twisted for the next couple turns, which might be a little bit difficult, especially for a team like Geo's that's typically built to be pretty fast.
We're waiting it out to see what that final Pokemon is. A lot of times in a match, you do see that restricted. It's not too often the restricted is left at home. So I feel like that is a decent bet, but really taking time to make sure you think about this turn. So sure enough, Koraidon comes on out. Definitely another one of those Pokemon that's not going to appreciate the situations in front of it. And I mean, when we're looking at 1 or 2 more turns of Trick Room, as that's going to be hidden from us, then it's still not in too great of a spot, especially too that Ogerpon having Spiky Shield the previous turn. Sure, the Koraidon can protect, but if you want to keep the Ogerpon safe, then you have to rely on a double.
That and the Koraidon, it really doesn't want to take an Expanding Force, and it really doesn't want to take a ground type move if it has to Terastallize into a fire type. So you're kind of stuck having to take at least 1 super effective attack this turn, unless you protect. And if there's another turn of Trick Room remaining, you might have to go for that double in order to not just be straight up knocked out by either this Lunala or Landorus. And let's say you even survive an attack and get an attack off. These 2 Pokemon, especially Lunala, are pretty bulky, and you're going to have a bit of a hard time breaking through them.
So this Ogerpon down with 1 HP off the field. So the Flutter Mane back in, speed heightened because of the sun, which is never too much fun when you're still in this Trick Room. But Koraidon, that is protect for this turn. So Expanding Force, the Flutter Mane is going to be at the mercy of the attacks. So that is going to be the first one. Normally a little stronger on that special defense end, so it's going to be holding on just a little half. But this is the double up into the spot. So Flutter Mane goes down, and well, that already is then Geo down to final 2 Pokemon.
Great call from Bezod there. That Koraidon was way too important for Geo to risk losing it on this turn. And going for the Expanding Force there, and the Earth Power into that slot there, means that whatever happens, something takes a lot of damage. Either the Ogerpon gets knocked out, or the Flutter Mane coming in will be knocked out. And that's a really big deal, because now if Trick Room expires, after this current turn, I believe is going to be the last one, it's going to be much harder for Geo to exert any kind of control over this game. I think Geo's going to need a double protect on this Koraidon to have a shot.
That 1 and 3, always a fun one, but you got to do what you got to do. Ogerpon, the switch out for the Landorus, is trying to reposition, so once it's done, he good. As protect, that's the fail. So now Lunala, you get an attack that can hit both of these spots. Ogerpon will stay safe, but this is going to be a lot of damage into the Koraidon. It's the Expanding Force, it's in the terrain. You're at neutral, you don't have the +1 anymore, but it is still a Lunala. How much is this going to do? Koraidon, no shot.
Even if it did survive there too, that swap into Ogerpon from Bezod was really, really smart. Made sure that once this turn ended and Trick Room expires, you can protect that Lunala from another couple attacks. We saw that the protect from Koraidon came before the Ogerpons, I believe. Kind of gives away that speed interaction there. The Ogerpon on Geo's side a little bit faster, and Heavy Cudgel wouldn't have been able to knock it out. So we would have been able to get at least 1 more attack off from Lunala and Expanding Force able to finish off the game had the Koraidon not just been knocked out immediately. So very, very well played from Bezod. Made great use of that Trick Room and the Psychic Terrain to just let Lunala kind of run through this game. 1
game closer into a top 4 spot here with Lunala out of all restricted, and making this Pokemon look so strong and capable in this match. Even when there was this Chiyu on the opposing end, go for this Snarl. Make sure you're not being able to utilize this special attack boost that, like, your item's dedicated for that. This is what you kind of need for this match. You're still able to put on so much pressure in this Trick Room situation, and with that Expanding Force, that it was completely okay. And yeah, once the Trick Room was set up, it was just this uphill battle for Giovanni that he wasn't able to overcome.
That Trick Room was really detrimental. You have to wonder if Geo didn't really expect Bezod to go straight for that mode right away. And maybe you see the Roaring Moon and think, oh, it's a quicker team. I can, go with my Flutter Mane, which can outspeed Roaring Moon, and, threaten it right off the bat. But Bezod smartly calling that, hey, if I get Trick Room up, there's not a ton that Geo can do. You have to think, looking at Geo's team, maybe the Raging Bolt could be something that could come to the next game. Has that Assault Vest, has the potential to maybe withstand a couple attacks from the Lunala, but we also saw the Landorus from Bezod, which is kind of Raging Bolt's #1 enemy. It just takes no damage from those electric type attacks, threatens with huge ground type damage from that Earth Power or Sandseer Storm. So there's some tools that Geo can have to maybe withstand this Trick Room. Maybe even the Ditto comes. If the Lunala starts getting set up, you can send in your Ditto and say, hey, those are my boosts now too. But interesting to see how these players are going to adapt going into the second game.
At least be nice that Ditto has the focus sash, but it's still such a tricky situation. And like looking across the board, when you have just this Lunala and the Indeedee, it almost feels impossible to stop a Trick Room, and then you still have to give so much respect to just going for an Expanding Force from the get-go, because that is still, as we got to see, a lot like damage that your Pokemon just weren't able to stand up to.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's difficult. This Lunala is a big deal in this matchup. Obviously, the Chi-Yu is your kind of one thing that takes resisted, if not zero damage from those Lunala's attacks. But it's got to be so scared of that Meteor Beam. You have to deal with the Urshifu, with the Landorus, with the Indeedee redirecting your attacks. So it's not like Chi-Yu is kind of a free ride here, as we saw in that last game.
Up one in the series. Time to see if Azad can close out another match with Lunala and secure a spot in top 4, or if Gio can take this into a game 3. We're running back the leads from game number 1. This is where we saw that Trick Room that Gio was unable to deal with. Are we going to see that again here on the first turn?
I wouldn't be too surprised. That Trick Room was so helpful for Behzad to get going in this game. There was always the option to just go straight on the offense as well, especially considering the Ogerpon there with the Sturdy might have, you might want a reason to break that Sturdy right off the bat, and then that gives you a better chance of using that Meteor Beam into the Chi-Yu later on. The Indeedee on Behzad's side is running the attack Alluring Voice, so it doesn't have its own Psychic type attack to take advantage of terrain, doesn't have the Dazzling Gleam to hit both, but it does have the option to confuse some Pokemon if they go for some setup moves. Not really going to be coming to play in this match, I don't believe, but just kind of throwing out some options there for Behzad. Follow me, Trick Room. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right?
Considering how that first game went, I would say, Alex, you're completely right here. So, yeah, follow me, Indeedee, center of attention. Moonblast from Fluttermane. Last time it was a swap out. Indeedee just gonna get softened up. So I think Udgel will be able to do a good amount of damage into this Pokemon. Not enough though. Indeedee holding on with 4 HP. Lunala, no Trick Room. Expanding Force, and wow, so much. At least you can take care of the Indeedee this next turn, but then Lunala hasn't taken damage. It has the Shadow Shields, and well, it's gearing up to just take a double KO if it clicks the Expanding Force button again.
On top of all that, the Fluttermane isn't running Shadow Ball, so you really don't have a way to threaten big damage into it with this Fluttermane anyway, into the Lunala rather, with this Fluttermane anyway. And especially now that this Lunala still has its Shadow Shield up, it's still in a really strong spot. You could try and break it with an Icy Wind to KO the Indeedee and, soften up the Lunala and then get an Ivy Cudgel off, but I don't think there's any chance that one hit KOs the Lunala. You still have to deal with maybe one more Expanding Force, maybe a Trick Room gets set up on the second turn to let it last a little bit longer throughout the game. So I liked the aggressive play from Gio there, just unfortunately doesn't KO Indeedee, and now he's in a rough spot again.
Chu swapping in, Ogerpon takes the lead, Beads of Ruin, as Fluttermane goes for Protect. So Expanding Force means nothing into the Chi-Yu, at least from that slot, and Follow Me, Indeedee, also not the offensive capability. So if there is a switch up from Behzad here, that could be huge. So Trick Room it is. Now the dimensions, again, in Behzad's favor, and it's looking very strong right now.
Yeah, especially now that this Ogerpon cannot redirect a Meteor Beam. You're looking at this Lunala that's eyeing up this Chi-Yu, saying, all right, I got you exactly where I want you. Even if Ogerpon maybe tries to swap in and catch this Meteor Beam, it's still in a position where you're like really just not threatening this Lunala at all, especially given this ability to Terastallize like you're seeing the hover there from Behzad. You won't take much damage from Snarl at all. The Snarl even comes through, and Gio has the option to Terastallize that own Chi-Yu, maybe survive the Meteor Beam, but if you do that, you just get Expanding Force, and it's going to be really tough to weather this storm.
And again, Lunala is just not taking any of that damage. The fact that the Fluttermane went through the Protect as opposed to something like that Icy Wind that you called out, really difficult situation. And Terastallization, Lunala into the Water type means then any Fire type attacks, well, that's not going to do anything. The Snarl is not going to be quite nearly as effective. This defensive Terastallization is just so strong. It's not necessarily surprising to see it yet again. Alluring Voice into the Chi-Yu. Just a little bit of damage. It would have been good for Breaking Sturdy if there was a potential swap, but it is Expanding Force, so Chi-Yu, again, no damage. Fluttermane, though, goes down. Chance now for Gio to bring in a different Pokemon that can be useful, and Chi-Yu gets an opportunity to attack on this turn. Heat Wave It misses the
Oh.
Indeedee, and Lunala is just not taking the damage. You break the Shadow Shield, which is good. That is the saddest critical hit I've ever think I've seen. But you get the burn, so that burn is actually, like, that's going to do more damage than they attacked almost.
Makes up for missing the Indeedee with the crit and the burn on the Lunala. You're right, it was a very sad
It's
critical
like, my
hit.
bad, okay.
Yeah, Bezad was going pretty hard with reading the Chiyu, either terastallizing or swapping out on that turn, and I don't think that's, you know, he didn't really get punished too hard for it, especially considering the miss on the Indeedee, but instead of taking a Snarl and lowering a special attack, your Water-type Lunala now took very little damage, and now you have the option to, again, Alluring Voice this Ogerpon, since Indeedee acted before the Lunala, and then fire off that Meteor Beam into Chiyu if you want. So still a very, very strong offensive position for Bezad. We haven't seen a final Pokemon from Geo just yet, but if it is the Koraidon, you don't really want to swap that in on the Expanding Force. So we have seen, I guess, Geo swap in his Koraidon on a strong spread attack from the opposing opponent's restricted Pokemon earlier on in this set. But I don't know that that's going to be the greatest idea here, especially considering you're already down to 3 Pokemon.
Looking at this game state too, this Ogerpon is so low on health. So if you did want to try and chip off that last amount of damage to then go for the Meteor Beam, that's a possibility you could go for. But you think that there is the possibility of attack or the Spiky Shield, that could be dangerous for you. So we are seeing the Ogerpon go for Protect, or the Spiky Shield, Indeedee, Follow Me to try and make sure the Lunala at all costs stays safe. No terastallization again from Geo, and now with this Meteor Beam, Lunala is gearing up to try and take this Chiyu down. Special attack is raised, Power Herb is used, and the Connect comes on through. Chiyu, this poor little fish, has no chance at standing up to that.
The little fish that couldn't, unfortunately. Chiyu really didn't have a shot there. The Ogerpon going for the Spiky Shield means that it didn't even get the chance to redirect it. But the Lunala also getting, you know, protected by that Follow Me from the Indeedee, but Ditto does come in here, and this is exactly what I meant earlier. When this Ditto could kind of copy this Lunala, now you have the special attack boost. So Geo, it purposefully was not terastallizing that Chiyu to let it survive something like a Meteor Beam, so it could get knocked out and copy this Lunala immediately. So a smart play from Geo there that might allow this Lunala to take over this game.
Some Dittos that we've seen have been that Choice Scarf, which would then be obviously not so great in this very moment, but this one's with a Focus Sash, so it does mean that you are going to be good regardless, plus being able to just copy the Lunala. So I'm very intrigued with how this is going to be matching up. An attempt at a double, Spiky Shield, it fails. Now, how does this happen with these Lunalas? Ogerpon is gone. All the hope down to Giovanni's stolen restricted. Doesn't even bring his own into the match. We're all on the Lunala train. Moongeist Beam into this Ditto Lunala. Right down to the Focus Sash. What are you going to do in return? That is going to be the biggest question. Expanding Force. Is that damage going to be there for the Lunala? It is! Double KO comes on through.
So Geo does manage to take those 2 KOs in return, finally clears the Lunala Indeedee off the field, but unfortunately is down to exactly 1 HP remaining in his tournament life. And if Bezad's 2 last Pokemon have a way to damage this Lunala before it can get knocked out, he's going to be able to wrap this game up. We see the Landorus and the Ogerpon, especially now that the terrain has gone down. I do believe it's actually impossible for Geo to come back. The Expanding Force is no longer a spread move, and there are no spread moves available to this Lunala now. So a simple Ivy Cudgel and Earth Power should be able to finish this game off and lock up a top 4 spot for Bezad.
1 HP, 1 turn of Trick Room, a very sad Ditto onto the opposing end. The double KO was nice, but hey, it would be crazy things to happen, but we're gonna play this out all the way to the end. We're gonna get to see the terastallization into that Ghost type, and you have 1 opportunity to see how much damage you can do onto the opposing end. Moongeist Beam into the opposing slot. You got that little boost with that terastallization as well, and into the Ogerpon. Done.
Just 1 more KO for the road fight. You want to make it a 1-0 instead of a 2-0. You got to respect it.
All right, there we go. Earth Power. That 1 HP is gone. Bezad, congratulations. Top 4 now here in Vancouver. What a breakthrough performance. Not